On June 16, 1993, a 3-year-old girl was shot dead outside her Denver home, an innocent victim of a surge that would turn a quiet mountain city into ground zero for America's deadliest summer. 59. Drive-by murders eclipsed New York and Los Angeles, shattering every sense of safety. How did prosperity and promise unravel into nightly gunfire and child funerals? The answer begins here. 3-year-old Ashonta Lancaster spent the last afternoon of her life playing outside her family's home on a patch of northeast Denver sidewalk. The summer air was thick with heat, the kind that draws children to the curb with jump ropes and sidewalk chalk. Ashonta's mother, Cassandra, watched her daughter from the porch, never imagining danger could reach so far into their ordinary day. Then a single shot tore through the quiet. A stray bullet fired from a passing car found its way to Ashonta. She collapsed in the yard, her small body crumpling as her mother's scream echoed down the block. Neighbors rushed out, some dropping to their knees, others frozen in shock. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but there was nothing they could do. On June 16, 1993, Ashonta was gone. Word spread quickly. By nightfall, dozens gathered in front of the Lancaster home, candles flickering along the sidewalk. Parents held their children close, tears streaming down their faces as prayers and laments filled the dusk. The crowd grew, spilling into the street, united by a grief that felt too heavy to bear. Ashonta's favorite stuffed bear sat among the flowers and cards, a silent witness to the loss. For her family, time seemed to stop. For the city, something broke. The murder of a child, so young, so innocent, shook Denver awake. The Lancaster family's sorrow became the city's own, and a single bullet forced everyone to ask, how had it come to this? In the late 1980s, Denver's streets looked nothing like the battlegrounds they would soon become. The city's reputation rested on powdery ski slopes and quiet suburban blocks, not on police sirens or gang graffiti. The oil boom faded and jobs dried up, and something new took root in neighborhoods like Five Points, Park Hill, and Montbello. Crack cocaine arrived around 1987, carried in by dealers from Los Angeles who saw fresh territory and little competition. With the drugs came the gangs, the Crips and the Bloods, each staking out corners, painting over walls, and recruiting teenagers who had grown up far from South Central but suddenly found themselves caught in a rivalry that was not theirs. Residents remember the first signs, blue or red rags tied to fence posts, unfamiliar faces on their blocks, and the sound of gunshots echoing through the night. At first, city leaders dismissed it as a passing phase, but by the summer of 1993, the violence had exploded. Drive-by shootings happened so often that families pushed mattresses against their windows and children learned to drop to the floor at the sound of tires screeching. That summer alone, 74 people lost their lives to homicide across the metro area. The headlines told of toddlers grazed by bullets and strollers, teenagers gunned down at bus stops, and families mourning at candlelit vigils almost every week. Fear was everywhere, at playgrounds, in classrooms, even in the simple act of walking home. For many in northeast Denver, the promise of prosperity had been replaced by a single question: who would be next? On July 22, 1993, Mayor Wellington Webb stood before the city, his voice tight as he declared an emergency. The message was blunt. Denver's leaders would use every tool at their disposal to regain control. That same week, a new gang bureau sprang into action within the police department. More than 100 additional officers were assigned to the hardest-hit neighborhoods, patrolling streets where gunfire had become routine. The city's new stance was unmistakable. Curfews for minors, stepped-up patrols, and a visible crackdown on anyone suspected of gang involvement. The Colorado legislature moved quickly, passing the Gang Recruitment Act. Recruiting minors into gangs was now a felony, punishable by years behind bars. Detective Martinez, one of the first assigned to the Gang Bureau, described the mood in the briefing room, a mix of determination and exhaustion. Officers worked long shifts, tracking down leads, mapping gang territories, and making arrests by the dozen. Webb's public statements left no doubt. This was a fight for the city's future, and compromise was off the table. For many residents, the sudden surge of uniforms and squad cars brought a sense of relief. For others, it was a warning that the city's war on violence had entered a new, unyielding phase. Not every answer came from City Hall or the police department. In the heart of Park Hill, a group of mothers began walking the sidewalks at dusk. No badges, no weapons, just a determination to reclaim their streets. They called themselves Mothers Against Street Violence. Each evening they linked arms and patrolled the blocks where gunfire was most common, greeting teens by name, offering a steady gaze where others saw only trouble. Their presence was a warning and a comfort. Someone was watching and someone cared. Churches opened their doors after dark, transforming sanctuaries into safe havens for children who needed a place to sleep or simply escape the chaos outside. Pastors and volunteers set up cots, served hot meals, and listened to stories of fear and hope. Meanwhile, former gang members stepped forward as mediators, using hard-earned credibility to broker peace between rival crews. The city funded new youth programs, basketball leagues, job training, summer camps, anything to keep kids off the corners and out of the crossfire. Night after night, the mothers walked. By fall, residents spoke of fewer gunshots and more porch lights left on. The fight for Denver's soul was not just waged in squad cars or courtrooms. It played out on the sidewalks, in church basements, and in the quiet courage of neighbors who refused to give up on their community. By September 1993, the city's numbers began to shift. The summer's violence had left 74 people dead across the metro area, but as curfews tightened and patrols increased, the pace of shootings slowed. The following year, 1994, the homicide count dropped to 81, lower than it had been in 1992. Police logged hundreds of arrests tied to gang activity, with the new gang bureau and the district attorney's office pushing for longer sentences using fresh anti-gang statutes. Some gang leaders faced decades behind bars. Others disappeared from the streets for good. On paper, the crisis appeared to wane. The headlines faded and families started to hope for quieter nights. But the pain didn't vanish with the statistics. Detective Martinez, after months of working double shifts, described a city haunted by what it had witnessed. Parents kept their children inside after dark. Teenagers flinched at the sound of sirens. Emergency rooms still treated gunshot wounds, but now doctors also saw the invisible scars, nightmares, jumpy nerves, children who couldn't sleep. The numbers told one story, the people living through it knew another. Denver's response to the summer of 1993 didn't just ripple through city blocks. It became a national template. Police chiefs from Baltimore to Omaha studied the gang bureau's model and the Safe Street strategy, mixing curfews, intelligence units, and community patrols, showed up in federal handbooks within a few years. Policy analysts point to Denver as the place where community policing and anti-gang statutes fused into a new standard, one that shaped how American cities would confront violence for decades. But the legacy didn't stop at law enforcement. In neighborhoods like Five Points and Park Hill, the aftermath redrew the map. Middle-class families moved out, businesses followed, and by the 2000s, gentrification had transformed once feared blocks into high-rent districts. The city's demographics shifted, and the cost of safety came with new lines drawn by wealth and race. Even now, the phrase "summer of violence" lingers in headlines whenever shootings spike. It's shorthand for a city's trauma, a warning, and a lesson all at once. Young residents who never heard gunfire in 1993 still use the term, not always knowing its origin, but feeling its weight. A policy analyst puts it simply, Denver's story became America's cautionary tale. But the question remains, did these strategies solve the problem or just push it out of sight? The answer depends on who you ask and whether you're looking at the numbers or at the scars left behind. Decades later, Denver still debates whether it cured the disease or just masked the symptoms. As youth violence surges nationwide, the city's trauma remains a warning. Policy can change numbers, but community trust and safety must be rebuilt every generation. History doesn't erase itself. What's your take?